What is free will and do we have it? Let's consider. Hello, philosophers. I'm Chico. Welcome to the Philosopher Show, where we consider the greatest questions of human history. So today we are going to look into the problem or problems of free will. And this is going to start off a whole series looking at the different theories of free will. But right now, we're just going to look into some of the questions that pop up about free will. And the first one is this. First, I would ask you, do you want to be free? Is freedom, what's so great about freedom? And I'm not saying that it's not great, but just why is it so great? What is it about freedom that makes it so great? Typically, when I ask this question in class, students will give me the answers like it allows me to achieve some desire that I want. And usually those desires are ultimately leading to the person's happiness. Now, what makes it interesting is I typically will ask the question, okay, so you want these desires, and what is it about the freedom that gets you these desires, and why don't you have these desires that you want? And sometimes they say, well, because I don't always choose the things that I want, that lead to those desires, which is odd, right? You wanted free will so that you could choose those things that you desire. What happened? And it's weird. I don't know. We don't always choose those things that we ultimately desired. So I sometimes I ask this question, and I'll ask you this. What if I could introduce to you a genetic engineer, a person that could go into your brain and just move around neurons, neuron by neuron, restructure your brain so that you would only make decisions that led to your ultimate achievement of your desires? You want to lose weight? You would only make decisions like eating salads, going to the weight room, like all those decisions. You look at an ice cream cone and you just can't even choose the ice cream cone. That's it. It takes away your free will choice to eat the ice cream cone. Would you want that? Now, for most of my students, not all of my students, but most of my students, they say no. And it's weird because the whole point of free will was to get that desire, and I offer them the desire without the free will, and they're like, no, I still want the free will though, right? Or how about this? What if I could introduce you to a social engineer, a person that could so orchestrate your life, starting from birth, that like you would be inundated with, subliminal type messages throughout your life and social pressures and all kinds of things that would change your behavior so that you would always make the decisions that lead to the desires that you have. So, there would be pressures, I don't know, from advertising and pressures from, I can't even think, in the educational system, and subliminal messaging in, shows you're watching. It would flash, eat salads or something like that, but you wouldn't know that you just saw it, right? It would just flash real quick. Stuff like that. Would you want that? Would you want your life to be masterminded by a social engineer? And most students, again, say no. They don't like that. They feel like they're being manipulated, that their free will is being encroached upon. So it's an odd thing. We want the free will, even if it gets in the way of our desires. But some people would argue that this free will that we think we have is just an illusion. We already, we're saying that we don't want these engineers tinkering with our brains or tinkering with our environment, but they say we already have environmental pressures that totally orchestrate the way we behave. From the moment you're born, your mother is automatically sort of showing you how to behave with positive reinforcements and and even some negative reinforcements, and training you up in a particular way, and the educational system trains you a particular way, and the advertisement in television is already training you to like certain things, and your people around you behave a particular way, and if you don't behave the way that they behave, then they shun you, and so you're brainwashed almost into acting the way that they act. Or, we don't like the fact that the genetical engineer was tinkering with your brain. Well, did you have a decision on how your brain was set up in the first place? No. So did you have a free will choice in the decisions that you were making in the first place? I don't know. The question then is, the first question we can ask about free will is there such a thing as deep freedom? So surface level freedom, by the way, this is, I'm taking this specific setup from a philosopher named Robert Kane, from his book on I think it's Introduction to Free Will or something like that. I'll put a link in, well, I'll put the book in the description. Another book I'll be using is Michael McKenna and Derk Pereboom's Introduction to Free Will. That's also an excellent introduction. But Robert Kane sets it up like this. He says, is there deep freedom? Surface freedom would be the freedom to just pursue your desires. The freedom to actually, just go after what you desire. And, if you get those things unhindered, then you're free. Whereas deep freedom would be something where it is you going for things and you not being influenced by or manipulated by outside influences. Now, if that's the kind of freedom that you have, then we will call that deep freedom. So the question is there such a thing as deep freedom, or is it only an illusion? The second question we can have is this. Let's say we have two guys, one named John Bender and one named Biff Tannen, and both of them are school bullies. Both of them are mean, and they seem arbitrarily mean, and they pick on the weaker, smaller people and make life miserable, and we don't like them, right? They're just bad people. But what if, in so disliking them, what if we find out that when it comes to John, there's a reason why he's so mean, that he's abused at home. In fact, his father even puts out his cigars on John's arm. And so he's been abused, and that has caused some neurochemical damage to his brain. And so therefore, he's not fully in control of his actions. Are we as mad at John as we are at Biff? If we find out that Biff has nothing wrong in his life, right? Biff was just coasting straight, no child abuse in his family. Seems like we're less upset with John than we are with Biff, right? And that's because it seems like when he has more control over his life, then he's more responsible for his actions. And that control, that freedom that we believe that we have, is an essential aspect of moral responsibility. So another question we have is, how responsible are we? If we have no free will whatsoever, are we morally responsible at all? If we have any amount of free will, then exactly how much free will, and does that proportional to the amount of moral responsibility that we have? Question number 3. So let's say a cue ball hits an 8 ball, and the 8 ball goes into a corner pocket. Now, the cue ball, we could say, determines the 8 ball going into the cue ball hitting the 8 ball determines the 8 ball going into the corner pocket. Why is that? Because the cue ball hitting the 8 ball is sufficient for the occurrence of the 8 ball going into the corner pocket. So we can have this formula: blank is sufficient for the occurrence of blank. And put whatever you want to in the second blank. All right. That second blank thing is determined if we can fill out that first blank, it's determined by whatever you put in the first blank. So the question then is, if we put our actions into the second blank, will there be something that we could put in the first blank? So for example, me hitting the cue ball, let's say I choose to hit the cue ball. Is that something that is determined to happen, or could it not have happened? That's the question, really. If you could put something in that first blank, right? If you could say blank is sufficient for the occurrence of me hitting the cue ball, then me hitting the cue ball is a determined event. I couldn't not hit the cue ball, right? I had to hit the cue ball if that's the case. So is there anything we could put in that first blank? Well, what about if God decreed from the beginning of time that I was going to hit the cue ball at that moment? Could I have failed to hit the cue ball? No, we could put that in that first blank, right? What if my brain were wired so that I had to hit a cue ball? I see a cue ball, got to hit it. So no matter what happened, I had to hit that cue ball. So my brain being in state B1 is sufficient for the occurrence of me hitting the cue ball. Then I would be determined as well. Possibly my upbringing, right? My cue ball hitting upbringing is such that I have got to hit this cue ball. So my upbringing is sufficient for me hitting the cue ball. The question number 3 is, are our choices determined? An event is determined if conditions that obtain earlier than the event are sufficient for the occurrence of that event. And possibly it's the case that all of our choices are determined like this. And there are a number of factors, a number of different things that could be determining our choices. So it could be fate, God, the laws of physics, the laws of logic, heredity, environment, unconscious motive, psychological conditioning, social conditioning, etc. And the next question actually from this is one that we're going to talk about a lot coming up soon, which is, if our decisions are determined, is this compatible or incompatible with us being free? So this is one of the major divisions in free will philosophy, is whether or not determinism is compatible with freedom, right? If our choice is being determined is compatible with us considered to be free. Sort of parallel to this, we could ask a couple of different questions. So I'm going to ask these questions as well, and they're going to kind of be related to these kind of determinist questions. John Searle actually has an interesting setup for one of these. So let's say you believe in determinism and you sit down to a restaurant and open a menu. What do? Sit back and wait to see what you're going to order? Seems weird, right? Like, if you believe that all your decisions are determined, then why are you even thinking about what you're going to do next? It seems right. That's what it seems like. Why are you going to do those things? It seems like we deliberate because we believe there are multiple options open to us. I could have the hamburger. I could have the pizza. I could have the salad. And so it looks to us like at each decision that we're going to make, we have a garden of forking paths. Each decision is like a node, and on that node, there are multiple different branching pathways that go from that node, and all of them are live options. And your decision will determine which one you're going to go on. And this is what's known as the ability to do otherwise. So the question is, do we have the ability to do otherwise or not? So, and this is one where Derk, Pereboom, and McKenna put this really well. Do we have the ability to do otherwise? Assume determinism is true. Assume that at least some persons have free will. Free will requires the ability to do otherwise. the ability to do otherwise is incompatible with determinism, though, right? If we are determined to do what we're gonna, if what like the conditions prior to an event determine what that event is going to happen, then there are no alternate, pathways. There's just like one pathway that's going to happen. So it seems like if determinism is true, then there are no alternate pathways. It seems like you are not able to do otherwise. So there's another question. So you see it's sort of parallel to the questions of compatibilism. Next question, let's say you have a sudden reaction to something you find repulsive. For me, it's cockroaches. When I was in, I think it was 5th grade, I lived in New Orleans for when I was a kid. It was Slidell, Louisiana. And I left my cleats in the garage, and I put them on, and I was going to go out to play soccer. And I felt the squirming in my foot, and I kicked off my shoe, and a cockroach popped out. And ever since then, cockroaches just freak me out, man. So whenever I see a cockroach, I automatically jump back, right? Like just ever since I'm a kid. So it seems like I don't have a control over that reaction, right? I automatically have this jump back reaction when I see a cockroach. But then afterwards, when I come after it to assassinate it, I do have control over that, right? So the first event, the first action I have, then I do not seem to be the source of that action. But the second action, I seem to be more of the source, right? It seems to be coming from me. The question, though, is that second one really coming from me? Or is that maybe just more of a reaction, right? Just maybe like, maybe it just seems like it's coming from me, but it's just more reaction upon reactions. Maybe I'm just a ball of reactions that are happening, and I don't ultimately get to be the source of all of any of the decisions that I make. It's just that something that happened to me when I was a little kid has totally determined the choices that I'm going to make as an adult. And that's going to include me killing the cockroach. So the question here is, are we the ultimate source of any of our actions? And again, Pereboom and McKenna put it like this, the problem like this: determinism is true, assume determinism is true, assume that at least some persons have free will. Free will requires that an agent is able to be the initiating source of her actions. But the ability to be the initiating source of actions is incompatible with determinism. So if you look back at the chain of events that happened, right, there's going to be some point in there where I am determined to make the decisions that I make by something that happened like before I was born. Like I was born to be a particular way, and then from there on out, the decisions that I make are all based on that. So is that the case is the question, right? Or do I get to be the originating source of any of my decisions? One final interesting thing is that determinism isn't really totally accepted anymore in the scientific community. There are interpretations of quantum theory that hold that it is indeterministic, and because of that, the free will debate has sort of changed. But that doesn't mean that things are easy now for free will believers, that all of a sudden, there's indeterminism in the world, so there must be free will. No, in fact, we're going to see coming forward, based on the luck objection, that actually indeterminism presents a problem as well for free will. But that's going to be in future videos. So please stick around. We'll look at, what does indeterminism have to do with free will as well. But those are the different problems that are presented with free will. Please let me know if you have any questions on any of them. And as I said, this is just the beginning of the playlist. So stick around for more videos, and like, subscribe, comment, and share this video with anyone and everyone you can. Don't forget to support this project with my Patreon page, and I'll see you in the next video. Adios.